All right, let's get started. Our third live stream of the day. If you're going to do it on signing day, you got to do it right. Do 3 live streams in a day, plus a bunch of recruit interviews and who knows what else. We did a lot today. It's coming to the end of the day, and signing day is always a long day. It's funny, when I first started this job, who knows how many years ago, 16, 17 years ago, I can always remember, like, boy, and I'd gear up for signing day, man. That was the big day. It was in December, and we would always, signing day starts at 7 a.m. The letters start rolling in at 7 a.m., so you got to be up by, 6:30, so you're ready to go, and you get your shower, and, you got to be ready to go, so you got to get up at 6 a.m., and that was, really early. I mean, knocked me out early. It's because I was up so early, and by the end of the day I was so exhausted, and it was such a long day. I couldn't believe I'd been up so early. And this was back 2005, 2006, well before I ever had kids or any of those other responsibilities that cause you to get up early all day, or all the time, every day. And so it's not quite the same level of exhaustion as previous years, but it's still a long day. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot that, we're running around. We went to Steel Valley, as you know, if you followed along any of our coverage today. We were at Steel Valley for Cruz Brookins' commitment and signing to Pitt. Back for a live stream, then back down to the south side, then back for more work and coverage, and it's just a lot. I mean, there's a lot that goes on signing day, but it's fun. I mean, it's a day where, we typically, at least on the Pitt front, there aren't usually too many surprises, good or bad. There might be one or two here or there. Every now and then you have something that doesn't go as planned, but largely it pretty much follows the expected course. And so you can kind of have a lot of plans. You can kind of put a lot of things in place. Like I said, we had all those, signing day capsules that we put on Panther-Lair.com, and, the different recruit interviews that we did, the Zoom interviews that we published here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We did a lot of stuff, and it was fun. It's fun to pump out that much content and kind of see some of the plans come together, and, everything sort of go off without a hitch. Now, I say that it's still only 8:30 at night, so I guess there could be a hitch coming up, but I think things are generally have gone off without a hitch. And so with that, we'll have a beer and have a little conversation here on the Panther-Lair Show on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. While you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The subscribe button is down there in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Click that, and you can turn on notifications so you get an alert every time we go live. We had, like I say, this is our third live stream today. We had one at 8:45. We had one at 12:30. We have this one here at 8:30. You knew this one would happen. This is our regularly scheduled live show. We decided to throw in a couple extra just to talk about the class throughout the day. And you might have missed that we were going to do that. You might not have gotten the notice. You might have missed it on Twitter or on the message boards. And you might have said, well, I didn't even know you were doing that. Well, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Turn on the notifications, and you won't miss anything. You'll get a notification. You'll get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live. So you'll be always dialed in and connected. So like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And of course, check out Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards where you can interact with lots of other Pitt fans. And the message boards have been busy today. There's been a lot going on, a lot of discussion about this recruiting class, about signing day, about the transfer portal and NIL, and all those other things that we talk about these days. It's been talked about on the Panther-Lair.com message board. So if you're a Pitt fan, it's the place to go for Pitt conversation and news and updates and just interaction with other Pitt fans. It's signing day. Everybody cares about their own school on signing day. You need to find other people who care about Pitt's class on signing day, and that's what we have, Panther-Lair.com. I'm going to go look, I'll start off by talking about the class. And, you guys can start posting comments and questions there. I'm going to get to those in a minute. Usually I Usually I'll talk for a while, usually about the first half hour or so of these live streams, and then we'll get into the comments and questions for the second half hour. I'm probably going to get to them sooner today. The reality is, if you've watched our live streams earlier today, you watched the morning pit this morning, you probably have an idea of what I think of this class. And so I don't want to repeat myself too many times. I probably will, because inevitably we'll talk about the same recruits. There's only 22 of them, 19 high school kids and 3 transfers. And so we're going to repeat some of the things we've already said today. Overall, when I look at this class, look, the ranking is what it is. As of tonight, right now, Pitt's got the number 50 class in the country. 50. Number 10 in the ACC. You're probably not going to win the conference very often, particularly once they eliminate divisions, if you bring in the 10th best recruiting class in the conference. Now, there's obviously a lot of subjectivity that goes into the rankings, and there's some wiggle room, this and that. This class is better than people think it is, or these guys are better than people think they are, or whatever. But ultimately, you need to do better than that. You want to have a class that ends up ranked better than 50th nationally, better than 10th in the ACC. And this class, when I look at it, I think I think there are some guys who are underrated. I'll say that right off the bat. I think there are some guys who are underranked. You know who I'm talking about. You know who I think, because I've talked about it all day. I've talked about it for a few weeks and probably a few months. And most schools could probably say that their class has 1 or 2 guys who are underrated. For Pitt, it's Jordan Bass and Shadarian Harrison. I think they're 4-star prospects. I think we missed the boat at Rivals by putting them as 3-star prospects. And that's not, I keep joking that I'm taking sides against the family. I think rankings evaluations are subjective. And inevitably, if you have a subjective evaluation like that, it's not a race where one guy finishes ahead of the other, and that's objective. Well, one guy was better than the other. This is subjective. We're all looking at the film. We're all trying to figure out how they project in college. We're all trying to figure out how they'll fit in a college offense or a college defense. And, in my opinion, when I look at those guys, they're 4-star prospects. And Jordan Bass is, a do-everything player on both sides of the ball for a team that went 15-0, won a state championship. And maybe team success doesn't matter, but you know what? He's the guy who drove the bus for that team. He was the best player in that area, maybe, one of the best players in the state of Virginia this past season for what he did on both sides of the ball. Shadarian Harrison, Pat Narduzzi said that he thinks Harrison is the best DB on his team, on the Lakeland team. And what he's saying there is that he's better than the number 1 defensive back in the country. The number 1 defensive back in the country is Shadarian Harrison's teammate. And Narduzzi's saying that Shadarian Harrison is better than that kid, which would make Shadarian Harrison the number 1 defensive back in the country, which he is not. He's not ranked as such, at least. And that teammate that Narduzzi's talking about is also the number 3 overall prospect in the country. Narduzzi is saying Shadarian Harrison, who was just on the screen a second ago, is better than that kid. Is, a top 3 recruit in the country. Now, I do believe the Pitt staff is really high on Jordan Bass and Shadarian Harrison. I think that they believe those guys are really, really good. Is Narduzzi... Is he right that Shadarian Harrison should be the number 1 defensive back prospect in the country? That's probably a bit of a stretch. But I also think he's really good, and I don't see any reason why he's not a 4-star prospect. They should have 3 4-stars in this class at a minimum. It should be Isaiah Neal, who got elevated from 3 to 4 stars. It should be Jordan Bass, and it should be Shadarian Harrison. Those 3 should be 4-star prospects, and like I say, no disrespect to the Rivals evaluators, I think they missed the boat on this. On those 2 guys, in particular, Bass and Harrison. I think they should be 4s. And then, you can start making debates about some of the receivers, Lamar Seymour, Kenny Johnson. I go back and forth about that. I think Jesse Anderson, who's on the screen there, should probably be rated, as close to a 4-star as possible. I forget exactly where we have him. But he should be rated pretty highly. I don't know if he's a 4, but he's pretty close if he's not there yet. Rasheem Biles, maybe if he had played a full senior season, probably could have a chance to get a rankings bump. Like I say, I like Kenny Johnson a lot. But overall, the rankings are what they are. And Pitt's class is ranked 50th. And I think even if you were to bump Bass or give Harrison a little bump, I'm not sure how, if it would make a huge difference on where they ended up with this recruiting class. But I think there's something to be said for how it fits what Pitt does, like how these 9 defensive recruits fit on Pitt's defense, because I think they fit really, really well. Or how some of these 10 offensive recruits fit what Pitt needed in this class. Pat Narduzzi talked about it. They needed to rebuild the wide receiver room. Well, they signed 4 guys. They needed to add some depth in the running backs. They signed 2. They needed to rebuild the quarterback room. They needed to remake the quarterback room, and they brought in 1 high school kid and 2 transfers. It's a remade quarterback room. If Nate Yarnell sticks around for 2023, he'll be the only holdover from last year among the scholarship quarterbacks, which is pretty remarkable. That's a remade room. And so I think if you look at the class through the prism, a couple different prisms of how they fit with what Pitt wants to do on offense and defense, and how they fit what Pitt needs on offense and defense in terms of depth and personnel, I think it's a class that fits pretty well and accomplished a lot of the goals. With players that the staff, I think, was prioritized. You can look at some of the late adds to the class. Obviously, Ty Diefenbach was a fill-in for Kenny Minchie. Cruz Brookins is a fill-in for Bryce Pollock. They didn't offer Brookins until Bryce Pollock decommitted. Maverick Grazio is just someone that Charlie Partridge has liked for a while. Israel Polk, they just sort of stumbled upon when they were recruiting Ty Diefenbach. Those late ads, call them whatever you want. Plan B, I guess. For Brookins and Diefenbach, that's effectively what they were. They got their offers when somebody else decommitted. But for the bulk of this class, really outside of those 4, you're talking about guys who were priority targets for the staff for a long time. And I don't think that's unimportant, that the staff prioritize these guys. Now, you if you want to be cynical or realistic or however you want to call it, you could say, well, that's great. If they want to land all their priority guys, they should just prioritize a bunch of guys who only have FCS offers. They'll go 20 for 20. They'll get every guy they prioritize. If you set the bar low, it's an easy bar to clear. But I don't think that's entirely what they did. I think they won some real recruiting battles. For Jordan Bass, for Shadarian Harrison, for Isaiah Neal, for Lamar Seymour, for Kenny Johnson, for Antonio Kamen, a few of the offensive linemen. They won, Ryan Coretta. They won some real recruiting battles for these guys. So they didn't just set the bar low and then, they got all their priority guys. They set the bar rather high with some of the guys they targeted and had to win some real recruiting battles. And even if the guys they lost, Bryce Pollock and Shelton Lewis in particular, those were legit recruiting battles that they won. And so, because people often bring up the recruiting bump that was supposed to come from winning the ACC in 2022, or 2021, excuse me. Why didn't the recruiting improve? Why didn't the recruiting class get better? Why are they still recruiting at seemingly the same level? And I think, the answer to that is there was something of a bump. I think I talked about this on the one of the earlier live streams today. There was something of a bump. All right, it didn't necessarily manifest in a class full of 4 and 5 stars, but I think you can look at a few things, and even if, again, you can be cynical or just realistic and say, well, they didn't sign those guys, so who cares? Big deal. It didn't help. But I think if you look at recruiting momentum coming out of the ACC championship game, you look at the pursuit of Hakeem Williams, the 5-star wide receiver, takes 2 unofficial visits to Pitt and an official visit. Okay, that wasn't happening before the ACC championship and before they hired Taekwon Underwood. But it wasn't happening. All right. Some of the guys they got here, some of these June commitments, Jordan Biles, Shadarian Harrison, Isaiah Neal, Bryce Pollock, Shelton Lewis, including a couple of guys that they ultimately lost. They weren't winning those recruiting battles, even to get the initial commitment before. But I think they did get momentum out of the ACC championship to at least put themselves in that position. Now, it didn't totally, manifest as a top 20 class, and that's unfortunate. It's disappointing, but I think it was a step up in recruiting. I think they were facing bigger challenges and going against tougher competition for a higher caliber of recruit. than they had in the past. And I think you can see that with some of the guys they signed. You can see it with some of the guys they lost. And that's the other reality of this too, is like if you do start aiming higher, as you continue to aim higher, you're going to face stiffer competition. You're going to have Bryce Pollock leaving in November and to go to the SEC. You're going to have Shelton Lewis decommitting a month after he commits to go to Clemson. You're going to lose Kenny Minchie to Notre Dame. Sometimes these things are going to happen. Pat Narduzzi actually had a funny joke today, and I don't think he was joking actually. He said, I might get to the point where if we want to have 20 guys committed coming out of June, I'm going to tell our staff to try and land 25 commitments, just thinking that we'll probably lose a few of those. It's just sort of the reality of the game these days. And if you recruit at that higher level, you're going to be fending off tougher competition in schools that are getting more aggressive, that have a lot of resources to try and be aggressive to get your guys away, which is what happened with Jordan Bass and Shadarian Harrison, that schools were trying hard, aggressively, to try to pull them away. And so much so that I think over the last week, there was probably a point with each recruit where the staff thought they were going to lose them. The Pitt staff thought they were going to lose them, where they believed that those two guys were probably going to delay their signing until February, which would have meant that they weren't going to go to Pitt. But it obviously didn't happen. They were able to hold on to those guys. They lost a few, Shelton Lewis, Bryce Pollock, Kenny Minchie. They held on to a few, Shadarian Harrison, Jordan Bass. Jesse Anderson got a late offer from Auburn. They held on to him too. And so I guess what I'm saying is I think there's a lot of negativity about this recruiting class, but I think you can find things to like. I think the top end guys, Isaiah Neal, Harrison, Bass, to some extent, like a Jesse Anderson, a Seymour, a Johnson, Kenny Johnson. I mean, they're really good players in this class. Not necessarily that one or two, like 5 or high 4-star guys to top it off with elite talent, but really good players. And again, players that fit what the staff wants to do. I think a lot of it makes sense. All right, let's see what we got on comments and questions. People rolling in here. Things they want to say. Of course, before we do that, I want to tell you about our friend Chris Gates. You should know about him by now. He's Chris. He's got an online fitness coaching business. He's an online fitness coach, and he works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. And he supports his clients really every step of the way. Plus, Chris is a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting the podcast, so we appreciate him for that. In 12 days, 12 days from now, Chris is going to be opening up the applications and accepting new clients from January 2nd to January 8th. And then after that, the applications are going to be closed until late spring or early summer. So the time to get in is coming up now. There's already been several Panther-Lair podcast listeners who signed up for coaching at the beginning of the football season, and their transformation's been really impressive. So if you're interested in setting a health or a fitness goal for the new year, you want to make sure you're able to not only make progress, but sustain it. Go to chrisgatesfitness.com. chrisgatesfitness.com. C-H-R-I-S, Chris, Gates, G-A-T-E-S, fitness.com. And you can get 75% off your first month of coaching if you mention Panther-Lair when you apply. So pretty good deal there, 75% off that first month. Chris will open those applications up again in the first week of January. Go check him out. This is a good time of year to try and set some lifestyle goals, some health and nutrition and fitness goals. And it's a good time of year for it. And Chris is the guy to go to about it. So support another Pitt fan. Go check him out. chrisgatesfitness.com. All right. Comments, questions. Let's jump into it here. Let's just have a little conversation. Joe New is a super chatter. And he says, you can be a super chatter also if you want to make sure that we get to your comment and your question. You can click the little $sign down at the bottom of the screen, contribute to the podcast, support the podcast a little bit, and we will make sure we get to your comment and your question. Joe New is a super chatter. He says, Pat Narduzzi seemed to throw Keaton Slovis under the bus with the leadership comment. If so, I agree with his assessment. Yeah, Narduzzi had a comment about Phil Dracovic, the transfer quarterback who came in from Boston College, bringing more leadership than they had last season. And, I mean, pretty clearly a shot at Keaton Slovis, fairly or unfairly. Look, I don't think there's any question that Keaton Slovis didn't fit in very well. Didn't fit in with the offense. Maybe didn't fit in with some of the coaches. Maybe didn't fit in with some of his teammates. I think if he had played better, or if he had been put in a better position to play well, maybe there had been different reaction. Maybe things would have gone differently. Joe New, you agree with Narduzzi's assessment that the leadership was lacking last season. That's good. I don't have a lot to go on in that regard, right? I'm not in the locker room. I don't know what it's like in the locker room. You hear rumors this, rumors that. You hear guys say things publicly, this or that. I don't know. I think he struggled. I think Keaton Slovis struggled, and I think he struggled for a lot of reasons. Some of them were his own shortcomings. Some of them were, maybe the fit with the offense, maybe the fit with the offensive coordinator, maybe the fit with the personnel in some cases. I think there were a lot of reasons why the offense struggled this year. A lot of them have to do with Keaton Slovis and, leadership, this or that. I don't know. I mean, I think, his teammates voted him a team captain, which is pretty interesting, I would say, in terms of leadership and how he got on with the locker room. I don't think the locker room was as big of a problem as it's getting made out to be this offseason. It wasn't great, but when you lose, some of the games they lost, they lost 3 out of 4 in October, and the way they lost them, maybe it's not going to be great. The locker room maybe shouldn't be great when you have a stretch like that. I don't know. I mean, if Phil Dracovic comes in and plays really well, we'll hear a lot about good leadership. If he comes in and struggles, I bet we'll hear about bad leadership. I think Kenny Pickett genuinely was a good leader for that team, even when he wasn't playing well. When he started playing really, really well in 2021, it became even a bigger factor. He became an even bigger leader, I think, for that team because he was so demanding that everyone else kind of keep up to his level. You know what I mean? Like, how could you not give your best when you see how Kenny Pickett is balling out there? You know what I mean? And how Jordan Addison, too, for that matter. It's all about how you play on the field. I ultimately think that. I think if you don't play well on the field, if you play well on the field, there you can kind of, I don't want to say get away with a lot. We're going to hear a lot less about leadership issues if you play well on the field. Not to say that those two things are not connected, but in terms of one affecting the other. But I feel like if you play well on the field, it's all good. Let's see here. Josh Newark says, loved the streams today. Great stuff, keeping me distracted at work. Hey, that's my pleasure. It's signing day. You really shouldn't expect to get a lot of work done anyway, so we'll do our best to keep you distracted. We had a lot for you to be distracted by today. Royce Beacom says, has Pat Narduzzi identified previously losing recruits due to NIL like he did with losing Dadron Zipperer to Utah? And how competitive is Pitt in compensation in the NIL race? So, Pat Narduzzi had an interesting comment. He said that he didn't name Dadron Zipperer, wide receiver who was committed to Pitt and then flipped to Utah. But he said, we had someone, we lost, they went to Utah, and I'm pretty sure it was because of that. Like, his quote was like along those lines. He basically said Dadron Zipperer decommitted from Pitt and went to Utah for NIL money. It was pretty bold, and he's made a few headlines this week with comments about NIL, and obviously he had a lot to say about Jordan Addison last year. I guess he said on the Fan, was it yesterday or Monday? He said that he heard 2 teams offered Drake May, the Carolina quarterback, $5 million in NIL money, which is insane. Here's one quick sidetrack about NIL, all right? Particularly as it relates to recruits. This isn't even about Drake May. It's just a thought I've been having about, as far as recruits go, people are going to find out. The people who are funding these NIL collectives are going to find out that there's a limit to what actually makes sense in football recruiting. That you could give a guy $400,000, but it's going to be really hard, and there's only a few guys who are actually worth that much money because it's going to be really hard for that one guy to change your fortunes that much. Now, there are guys like that. Look, Trevor Lawrence coming out of high school probably would have been worth $400,000 or $250,000 or something like that. But I think what we're going to see is these collectives figuring out over the next few years, like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to do it in basketball, and put like $400,000 toward like two guys, then it makes sense because those two guys can win you your conference and maybe even get you into the Final Four. Like in basketball, one or two guys can make that big of a difference. One or two guys can make a big difference in football, but not enough to get you into the playoffs. Like, you need to have the whole team built up around them and then have one or two guys who top you off and make you truly great. And to expect that from a high school recruit, I think you're going to see over the next few years the money for high school players, the amounts are going to go down. Transfers will probably stay the same or maybe go up a little bit, and retaining your current players will probably go up. That'll become the priority. The priority for NIL money will be keeping your guys on the roster, getting transfers. Number one, keeping the guys on the roster. Number two, getting transfers. Number three, high school prospects. Because in terms of your success for this year, for the coming season, the guys that are going to impact it the most are going to be keeping your top guys, making sure they don't get away, and getting transfers to fill out around them. More than the recruits. The recruits are important long term, but in terms of winning next year, coming into this season, all right, the player it would have made the most sense to spend NIL money on would have been Jordan Addison. It would have been him, all right, and there's not really a quarterback that you would be able to. I mean, I guess if you could have ponied up the NIL money to go get Caleb Williams or something like that. Or a really good quarterback, someone better than Keaton Slovis. But that's the guy who would have helped them the most going into 2022 was Jordan Addison. And that's the guy that the money should have been spent on. And I think there were attempts to, offer him better NIL deals to try and get him to stay, but ultimately USC had a better package, a better fit, better everything, But I think that's the shift. I think that's the way things are going to go because it just doesn't make that much sense to give that kind of money to recruits. And I think at a certain point, the market's going to kind of correct itself on that front. I think. I could be wrong, but that's what I think because it seems to make sense. Now, to your question, who asked that? Royce, I think. To your question, Royce, I've not seen Pat Narduzzi be that blatant about calling out an individual player in an individual school for an NIL deal. He certainly had strong comments about Jordan Addison and Lincoln Riley and USC. But I've never seen him be that blatant about it before. How competitive is Pitt? That's a great question. I actually wrote a long thing, and I don't think anyone actually read it. In the 321 column on Panther-Lair.com on Friday, I wrote 2 long sections about the challenges facing Pitt in the NIL landscape. And the two issues that are there's two issues that are like I say are challenges for Pitt right now. One is sort of short term, one is long term. The short term is that they're limited in some capacity by Pennsylvania state law. One of the issues, Heather Lyke brought this up a couple of weeks ago. One of the issues with all of the NIL situations for all schools is that each state has its own laws. And some states and some laws are more permissive than others. And Pennsylvania is not necessarily in that group. And Penn State is suffering, struggling under this. Temple probably. One of the things is promotion. You need the money to go to these NIL collectives that can then facilitate the deals. Pitt can't do that. Pitt can't facilitate the deals themselves. And Pitt can't promote like Alliance 412 as a collective where fans should donate their money. They can acknowledge their existence, and they actually held a educational forum, like co-hosted it with Alliance 412, but they can't actually promote it. You can go around. I found a tweet where Hugh Freeze was like straight up cutting a promo for Auburn's NIL collective. Pat Narduzzi could not do that. Bob Huggins had one for West Virginia's NIL collective a couple of weeks ago. James Franklin could not do that. Micah Shrewsbury could not do that. And that's because of the state law. Now, the state law is going to change in January, and that should free up some things a little bit. But there's a second problem, too. And the second problem is that Pitt's donor base just isn't that strong. And ultimately, that's where this money is coming from. And even if it's not coming from a bunch of $50 donations, even if it's, these schools that are really excelling at leveraging NIL, even if, those schools are getting it from a couple of big money donors as opposed to a big group of people, either way, Pitt doesn't have that kind of support. They don't have the quantity or the quality of supporters. And that is probably the bigger issue. You need to be able to connect the people who are willing to give money with the people who can do the things with that money. And that's what Pitt's not able to do right now. They can't facilitate those things. But you also need that group of people who are willing to give money to be big. And Pitt's is not. Pitt's is small. And you run into sort of a further complication, sort of a subset of that second challenge, where, if you're Pitt or any school really, administrators have to be sitting back and saying, okay, we need the NIL money. We need the donors to give money to the NIL collective so the collective can then funnel that money to the recruits so we can get good players and we can win games. We need that to happen. We also need those same donors to give those same dollars to us so we can build new buildings and do new cool things and update things and upgrade things and raise money. And so, if you're Pitt, right? Let's say, new state law passes, you're able to promote Alliance 412. How do you decide how strongly to tell people, give your money to Alliance 412 when you're trying to raise like $200 million to pay for the Victory Heights Olympic Sports, complex that you have not raised? You're taking out loans to pay for. The university is loaning money to pay for or taking out loans to pay for. How do you find that balance? If your donor pool, no matter how big or small it is still finite, right? There is some limit where there's X amount of dollars that's ultimately available to come in, to be donated in Pitt's interests, right? And all schools have this. All schools have some finite amount, no matter how rich and crazy their Texas oil man donors are. It's a finite amount. Eventually, it hits capacity, right? How do you manage that? If you're the university, if you're the athletic department, if you're the administration, the athletic director, the director of athletics, whatever you are, how do you manage that balance of saying, yes, here's where that money needs to go, this collective, that collective, this this NIL situation, that NIL fund, when also saying we need this, and we need this, and we need this. We need our general fund, and we need our scholarship fund, and we need you to donate to all these other general athletics things that are not just a slush fund to funnel the cash to the players and the recruits. And that's an interesting sort of, situation that I think, Pitt is dancing with. And Pitt's not the only school facing that challenge. Pitt's biggest challenge is that finite pool of donor money is small, as opposed to some other places where it's very large. Pitt is facing that challenge of having a small, finite pool of donor money that they then have to figure out how they want to manage and where they want to push it and what they want to sort of suggest to their donors who are willing to give, straight cash, homie. So there's a lot of challenges in there. This is all a long way of answering your question, Royce. I think they have been competitive in NIL at times. I think there have been things they've been able to do. I think there have been players, transfers, and recruits that they've been able to get, current players they've been able to hold on to due to, NIL. And again, that's not necessarily Pat Narduzzi leading the charge on that. That's outside groups, third-party groups, but, the job has gotten done. But you can always do more. I mean, it's college athletics where there's always an ever-climbing ceiling of what you can accomplish in terms of facility upgrades and certainly in terms of NIL dollars. You can always do more. You can always have more success in it. So I think they've been competitive. but they could do more. All right, let's see. Reed Worth says, I'm excited about this class. A lot of raw talent. Looking forward to Jordan Bash, Shadarian Harrison, and Isaiah Neal. Not worried about any of the decommits. When was the last time a Pitt decommit had a noteworthy career? That's a good question, Reed. I'd have to think about it. I mean, Henry Parrish has been pretty good when he's been healthy. He's been hurt for a little bit, though. But he had a pretty good start to the season at Miami this year. T. Denson was a corner a couple years ago who was committed, class of 2020 maybe, and decommitted, went to Kansas State and actually played as a freshman, but then he transferred again. I forgot where he ended up. I have to think about some other guys. There was a defensive lineman who was like, this was back like Paul Christ era, who I think he was committed to like Miami of Ohio or somewhere, ended up flipping to Pitt, and then flipped to Kentucky, and then flipped to Ohio State, and I'm pretty sure he got drafted a year or two ago, or maybe a few years ago, I guess, if that timeline with Paul Christ lines up. So there have been some. Alex Hornibrook ended up being okay at Wisconsin, and then I think he went to Florida State. I'd have to go down a list and look. But the thing is, there are more and more decommitments. And so there's going to be a greater possibility of those guys panning out and having good careers. But we'll be able to see Kenny Minchey. So we'll have some idea what happens there. And we'll keep an eye on Shelton Lewis because he's going to Clemson. And we'll see him as well. Josh Newark says, evaluate the quarterback room scenarios. 1, Slovis returns and Minchey signs as a long-term future versus 2, Jurkovec for 1 year. Christian Veer in 2 years battles Diefenbach for the future. Which scenario would you want? So let me sum that question up again. Would you rather have Slovis for 23 and Kenny Minchey for the future, or Phil Jurkovec for 23, Christian Veer for the next couple years after that, and then possibly Ty Diefenbach? Personally, if it's me, I'll be completely honest with you. I mean, give me Slovis and Minchey. I like Slovis as an option for 2023. I think his second year in Frank Cignetti's offense could have been much better than his first year was. I think he would have been a good option. And I think he could have improved in 2023. And I also think Kenny Minchey's a really good quarterback prospect. I like Minchey a lot. I really do. I liked him a lot looking at his junior film when he committed to Pitt. And I liked him a lot, looking at his senior stuff too. He kind of battled through an injury and still, I think, was really good as a senior. So, if I have my choice of those two scenarios, now, I mean, I think Phil Jurkovec should be fine as a starter this season. I think Christian Veer is really intriguing. He's a high pedigree guy. He had a lot of offers coming out of high school before he settled on Penn State. So, I mean, I think those guys are good players, and they could play well for Pitt over the next few years. But I kind of think that Slovis-Minchey tandem might be the one to go with. But that's just me. It's just me. Josh Newark says, is O-line depth a problem moving forward with so many guys leaving this year? Yeah, depth, like starters? No, I don't think so. Depth, maybe a little bit. You lose, right now they're set to lose Marcus Minor, Owen Drexel, Carter Warren, and Gabe Hoy. But the thing about that is Drexel missed a bunch of time this season. Warren missed almost the entire year. Hoy was in and out of the lineup. It took him a while to really kind of get into the lineup, and then he even missed a game late, the Virginia game. I think he didn't travel for. And so amidst all of that, you got Matt Gonsalves and Branson Taylor a ton of playing time. Ryan Jacoby has played a lot, mostly as a tight end, but he's been on the field and experienced it. And then like Jake Cradle and Blake Zabovic, those are two guys with options to come back as sixth-year seniors, super seniors. And we don't know what they're going to do yet. They haven't made any announcement one way or the other. But if those guys come back, you've got Taylor and Gonsalves as the tackles. And then you've got Zubovic, Cradle, and Jacoby as your interior guys, your guards and your center. And then Ryan Baer behind them. He played a little bit, but he's got, as high a ceiling as any of those guys. I think you could be pretty well set with your starters. What you really need to develop is your depth. You need guys somebody's going to have to step up. Terrence Moore, Terrence Enos, Jason Collier, Ryan Baer, like I mentioned. Some of these younger offensive linemen are going to need to be ready to take a big step because they might be called on. They're going to be the depth at the very least in 2023. And they're, in the event of an injury or something like that, they'll have to get on the field and they'll have to play. So, is depth a concern? A little bit, because I think it's unproven. We might be freezing here. I apologize if we're having a connection issue with our stream. Apologize about that if it was. Seems like we're buffering a little bit here, and I apologize for that. I'm not sure what the problem is, why we're not streaming as well. I was going to kind of, I thought we might, yeah, I know it's buffering, guys. I apologize for that. Let me see here. Yeah, it looks like we're having some buffering issues. And the reality was I was only going to go about 45 minutes tonight anyway because we've done a lot of streams now. So hopefully everyone can hear and know what we're doing and hear what I'm saying here. But I think we're going to we might be operating again. We might have our signal back. But let me see here. Brock Madonic asks anything about what led Zion Fowler back to Pitt. I think he, just kind of real quick, it seems like he had maybe got some bad advice that he should go look around at other schools, but then decided that Pitt was probably the one he wanted to be at. I'm not sure if he really generated much other interest in that whole kind of situation. So seems like he just decided that he ultimately liked Pitt. But I'm hoping to speak with him soon. Hoping to speak with Zion Fowler soon. About that decision to come back to Pitt, and we'll get a little more answers there. But what I was saying there is the video was buffering, and I think it's starting to happen again, is that we're going to call this one here. Went about 45 minutes because we already have about an hour of live streams that you can watch on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So let's bid adieu to this night. We're going to keep talking about the recruiting class over the next few days, certainly on the Morning Pit tomorrow and maybe even on Friday as well. And you guys can, I might start doing a mailbag Morning Pit. And so options are out there for submitting questions. That'll always be interesting and lead to some good conversation, good topics. But we're going to close the book on signing day, at least for this night. We're going to put the nightcap on it. I appreciate everybody who tuned in all day today with all the live streams that we did and all the different videos. If you don't like that we're ending at 15 minutes earlier than we usually do, you can always go and watch all the other videos that we put on YouTube today because we had a lot of video content out there. But it's been a long day, and I think we can take a little break here. I do appreciate everybody who tuned in throughout the day and certainly here tonight for the live show. As always, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate that. I know you enjoy the content and appreciate it if you subscribe. You can turn on notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone whenever you are, whenever you want to know, or whenever we go live, so you know that we're starting a live stream and you never miss it. But check out Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Panther-Lair.com. We will talk to you again live next Wednesday night right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, 8:30 p.m. In the meantime, have a great holiday, everyone. We'll have a couple more Morning Pit videos for you between now and the weekend, but we won't talk to you live until next week. So have a great holiday. Hope everything goes well for everyone. Hope you have a happy and safe one. Stay inside where it's nice and warm. thanks again for checking it out. I really do appreciate it. For everybody who watches the live stream and the morning pit videos and all of those things, can't thank you enough. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the night. We will talk to you for the morning pit tomorrow, and we'll have one on Friday as well. And it'll all be right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.